He was born in Palestine. Even though today, from the time of beginning of the country, the place, or even today, last 3,000 years or 4,000 years, we know Palestine is the place of struggle, the place of conflict, where the King of Peace, the Redeemer, was born. Okay, so now when Jesus came, we know a lot of things happen, and he also preached, and disciples were formed, and then they witnessed to Jesus, his life and his resurrection, and finally they also were sent to preach the same Jesus to the whole world for the salvation of everyone. Now, in this way, there were a lot of oral traditions about Jesus, new true words of Jesus, and also other written traditions came, and they are all called the New Testament. New Testament, which Father Mathew today he will explain to us. And so, if we go through, it is not just reading the text of the New Testament we can understand. That will take time. But at the same time, even to understand the general background of the New Testament books, we need also the background of the New Testament, the social, political, religious, all these backgrounds. That's why we are now today, these 2 hours are allotted to understand, to explain the background of the New Testament, so that it is in a very simple introduction to the New Testament to understand the books of the New Testament. So we have with us Father Dr. Mathew Palachuvattil. He was born in Kerala, my place where I am now in Palakkad, but he is born not in Palakkad. I think he must be Pala or Kottayam side, Chuvattil, but he is a priest of Jalandhar diocese. He was educated and ordained a priest there in Jalandhar. Afterwards, he went to Rome for his licentiate in biblical Bible studies, and in the Biblical Institute Rome, and also followed by his doctorate in the Gregorian University. In 2007, he completed his doctorate in the Gregorian. And now he is also teaching in the major seminary in Jalandhar, Holy Trinity. Today we are celebrating the Feast of Trinity. So his seminary is named after this Holy Trinity in Jalandhar. He is also teaching Bible, and also he has a lot of other assignments, teaching and other biblical apostolic assignments. I am very happy to welcome Father Mathew Palachuvattil to explain to our participants, our students of this college, about the general introduction to the New Testament. And his doctoral thesis also he dealt in Matthew only, in the Gospel of Matthew. So he is also Matthew, and his specialization is also on Matthew. So we, on behalf of everyone present here in this course, I welcome him. Welcome, Father Mathew.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your words of introduction. And Matthew has just left, I think, on account of an internet error. Just I will call him. Yes, come again. Okay, good. Father Mathew.
At this pandemic time, we have to be a little more patient, and also we have to find out different alternatives also when we don't get internet net well, and
Yes.
so I hope Matthew is here. For Matthew,
Now left again, Your Excellency.
you can call him, or otherwise we have to manage, but we can manage, but then we have to wait for him. Yes, and the meantime, I can also tell about the thing, but background, in the background, we see with regard to we know for New Testament, there are 27 books, 27 books. But it is not just 27 books only that came up in the New Testament and the early Christian church time. There are many came more than about, yes, you see here, more than 120 books came. Then the early church in 120, around that time, the church leaders met together and they read all the books and finalized the list of the, yes, Father Matthew? Finalize
Well,
the
Matthew
list
has
of
come, Your Excellency.
the.
Yes.
Yes, you are come. Yes, you continue.
Yes, Father Matthew.
You
Thank you, Your
can continue.
Excellency.
Yeah, okay, continue.
Can't hear fathers unmute.
For we are not able to hear you, Father Matthew.
Yeah,
Father
try.
Matthew? Yes, Father, yes.
Speak. Yes, a problem of adjusting his net connections. Okay, continue. Hello.
Yes, Father, we
Again.
can hear. Father, you can start.
Yeah. Okay, come.
Father, we can't hear you, Father.
You have to check with your audio.
Father?
Maybe then yes, so you can continue.
Okay.
then he can join because it is taking time.
Okay, Your Excellency, I will continue.
Yeah, because I can do, but then since you are here, you can do.
Can you hear me now? Is it better?
Okay, okay.
Yes, Father.
Mathew? Okay. Continue. Yes, when you are ready, you tell us. So, okay, if you read the first verse and first lines of Acts of the Apostles, it is Luke is telling. Luke is the author of the book of both books, the Gospel of Luke and also Acts of the Apostles. He says both in Luke's Gospel, the beginning, and also in the Acts, he says he is writing to addressing to a particular person, but he says, I have gone through all those written tradition, written works, and verified everything, and I am going to give you what is happened. That is what the text goes. So, Father is there. Yeah, as soon as he comes, you can tell.
Okay, Your Excellency.
Okay. So this one, therefore, there were so many oral and written tradition about Jesus Christ and his parables and his all the teachings and also miracle stories. Then afterwards, there are also some people wrote. Actually, it is in Matthew. We know Matthew wrote in Aramaic some sayings of Jesus. So like that, so many people wrote. Afterwards, they codified, and the books came. That is from 50 AD to 120 AD. All the books that were codified and they were studied by the early church leaders, and finally they shortlisted. That is called canon. That means the list of the New Testament, canon of the New Testament. Canonical books, we say there are 27 books. And so with the, I don't know what happened to our Matthew. Is he still trying?
He's
Yes,
still trying, Your Excellency.
I'm
Matthew?
online. Yes,
Yeah.
Yes, Father. Are
Yes,
things
Father,
okay?
yeah,
yes,
you can.
yes.
Yes, Father, you may start, Father, with your
We hear
presentation.
you. Yeah, speak.
Yes, so I'm going to share the screen so that some of you can see what I'm going to present.
Yes, Father,
Okay.
please.
Okay. So the idea of this class was to introduce people to some of the main terms that we will normally hear when we are studying the Bible. For example, if somebody were to look at the newspaper of today, after some 10 years, they will find some words like COVID, BJP, vaccine, etc. To understand that, they should be able to really know what these things are all about. In the same way, I think we need to also look at some words to find out what are some of the words used in the Bible to tell people about, so that we can understand whatever we are reading. what are the things we find in the Bible? For example, some words, some places. Okay, the first thing was formation of the books of the New Testament. So Bishop has already been telling you about that. When we look at Jesus, we know one thing. Jesus himself did not write any book. Jesus did not write any book. He did not dictate any book. He did not give an order to anybody to write a book also. So then what happened? Jesus went around. He was proclaiming. He was teaching. He was healing people. That is how Jesus went around. So we can say a summary of Jesus' life, we can see in that he went around preaching the gospel of the kingdom. He was teaching the people and he was healing. So this is how the gospel of Matthew will present a summary of the work of Jesus. In this summary, we know that Jesus was busy preaching, and it was after him that these things began to be written down. And when they began to write down, there was a statement about what they had seen. When you read the book of John, the first letter of John, it says, we are eyewitnesses. We are telling you about what we have seen and what we have heard, what we have touched with our eyes. So these are the things about which they were telling people. And then they shared with people their experiences about the experiences of Jesus. And they also reported their own faith in front of people. So they shared their experiences, they shared their knowledge, they shared their faith. So these are the things they shared about Jesus with the people. And as it went on, these experiences sharing took different forms. Sometimes they told about what happened and they described these things. In the Bible, we call them narrations. They narrated what happened. Example is, they said Jesus went to a place, Jesus saw a person, Jesus said something to somebody, etc. So that way, they will present Jesus to what Jesus did. That was narrations. Sometimes they will write all the things that Jesus said. Many of the sayings of Jesus are collected together and they are presented as a discourse. At times we have got some of the stories Jesus told. They are recorded. These are called parables. Some of the sayings of Jesus have been recorded. We say the wise sayings of Jesus. Then
the presentation I'm not able to see.
I actually also could not put it on. That was the problem. I was trying to turn on the presentation, but I am not able to get the presentation on to the screen. So sorry.
Or you can take the presentation page. If you open, we will be able to see that.
Okay, just 1 minute.
Just you open your PowerPoint, then we'll be able to see. Oh, so many windows.
Are
Yes,
you able
Father.
to see?
Yes,
Okay.
Father. Now you can open the slide view or
Slide view.
presentation
Okay.
view. Yes, Father. Bottom.
I think my screens are all clashing. That I think
Yes,
is a
Father.
problem.
It's very slow. Maybe just you can maximize size.
Yes, I will do that. Are you
Okay.
able to see it now?
Yeah, we are able to see, Father. Yes, Father.
Okay. So I was telling you, I have reached here. We saw
Yes.
the sum. So Jesus went around. So 3 words of summarizing. Then we said, what was Jesus doing when he went around? He went around saying that he is the Son of God. That's a claim he made. Then he was revealing the Father, and he was teaching the people the way to go to the Father. And Jesus gave an invitation to people to love the Father and to share in his life. So after Jesus, the disciples started sharing. They started sharing the experiences. That's what we said in 1 John 1:1. They said, we are telling you what we have seen and what we have heard. Then they have also shared the knowledge. John 6:69. We have come to know and have believed that you are the Son of God. That knowledge they shared. They also went around and shared their faith. We are witnesses. So they gave witness to their faith. And whatever they said about Jesus, all the witnesses they gave, this got classified into what we'll call different forms. That's what I was explaining just before. So the forms are called narrations. Jesus went, Jesus said, Jesus did, etc. These are narrations. When there's a big discourse, collection of the sayings of Jesus together, that becomes a discourse, like the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew's Gospel, or we have got the parable discourse, etc. Some of the stories Jesus told, they are called parables. Then the wise sayings of Jesus. Later on in other writings, we will come across some hymns, some acclamations, some explanations and exhortations. So these were all being shared orally, and they are called the oral traditions. So we have got a progress from Jesus to oral tradition. So what Jesus preached, it was continued by the disciples and transmitted as oral tradition to all the communities. So we say from Jesus to disciples. What happens after this? There came a time when these eyewitnesses, that means those who were with Jesus, those who had seen and touched, etc., and the apostles and disciples, they were growing old. They were also, the church was spreading, so there was a problem of geographical distance. There was also the problem of conveying the message in every place. So there was a requirement. They wanted to put things in writing. There was a felt need to put down in writing for future generations. So if you look at the Gospel of Luke or the Acts of the Apostles, both of these books begin by Luke saying that I also decided to write about certain things. Definitely that means Luke is one who is trying to answer the need of a community. The community needed some writings. So Luke is one of them who responded. Other writers also responded in their own ways. So the writings come. So we have got the third section. So we have put A, Jesus, B, oral traditions, the preaching that went on, and C, coming of the written works. We have put down here scrolls, because we must not think that they were writing books at that time as we are writing. They had to make use of papyrus, and with that, they would paste them together and make a scroll. So in fact, what they wrote were on papyrus, they wrote, and it became scrolls. And when many people wrote about Jesus, naturally, many things were the same. For example, Matthew and Mark and Luke, when they wrote, and John, when they wrote, there were so many things that were similar. So in this way, we will find similarities among the books about what they wrote. There are differences because they are all not sitting down and writing at the same place. And they are writing in different situations. The people who can write so the purpose of this is something. Not my but imagine the in the case he has religious, or if we look at some community more, they don't understand very easily. So both men who can't speak about this. The communities are different. The way they are speaking about Jesus is also slightly different. And how they are also is different. Matthew, if he is writing Jew, he can use more of Old Testament quotations because they know the Old Testament. Whereas if Mark is writing to a community which does not know much about the Old Testament, he will quote so much from the Old Testament because they will not understand what it is all about. So in this manner, because of the place of writing, situation of the community, the need, the purpose, etc., the writings became dissimilar. At the same time, there are many similarities because they are all writing about Jesus. This is about the Gospels we are speaking. So the different types of books that go as a part of this. Okay. So the different types. Hello.
Father, you can.
Yes,
continue.
Father, we can hear you.
Continue.
You can hear you, Father.
Continue.
Can I continue? Hello?
Yes, Father, you may continue, Father. But the presentation is not there for now.
Okay. 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 The different types of books that were written. The first four we call Gospels. Then we have the book of history, that's Acts of the Apostles. Then we have a collection of the epistles, Pauline, and then some of them are called Catholic. And finally, we have got the apocalyptic writing of John. This is given in detail on the notes we have received. Okay, so collection of all these books together became what is called the canon. When we speak about the Gospels, we know if you have got the RS somebody is using, just before the NRSV, there is an introduction which speaks about the different meanings of the word gospel. It speaks about the different meanings. One is gospel is what Jesus preached. Secondly, what the disciples preached about Jesus, that also is gospel. Thirdly, the books that is written about Jesus, that also is gospel. So the word gospel has got many meanings. Ultimately, it's all about the message that Jesus preached. And so the four gospels we have, then where the gospels were preached, Christian communities were formed. So Paul and other apostles and disciples started writing letters or writing documents that would encourage the community in their life. This became the epistles. Only the exception is Hebrews. It was thought earlier that Hebrews was also written by Paul, but now we know that it's not written by Paul. Then we have the writings, and then finally we have got the Apocalypse of John. So we had different writings. In fact, there were so many books that were written at this time, so many Gospels. We must have heard about a Gospel of Thomas, a Gospel of Peter, a Gospel of James, etc. So since so many books were there and many wanted to be included in the canon, there was always a problem, which would be selected. So it was like a process of selection that was going on. And then finally, some of the books got selected. They got a recognition. These are official. To be recognized, there were some conditions. One of the conditions was that it must have been connected to an apostle. It must have been apostolic. So those books which people accepted as coming from an apostle, they were accepted as apostolic. Then these books were also commonly accepted by many churches. That was another criteria for accepting the book into the canon. And thirdly, only books which were written before the end of the first century were taken in. So with all these, we had a number of books that came and the communities accepted these as official books. And we have the word canon. So canon, in the context of biblical studies, is a word which refers to officially accepted list of books. So we have a number of books, and we have in the New Testament 27 books. So these are called the canon of the Bible. About the canon itself, there were sometimes confusions because these books were circulating independently. Books were written on scrolls, so some church would have just one scroll, some would have some more, and in some cases there were scrolls which were not accepted. So there came the question about which are to be accepted and which are not to be accepted. So this was discussed at different councils. So we have three important councils in the history of the church that discussed about the inclusion of the books in the canon. The first council that is mentioned as very important in this is the Council of Hippo in 393. We know that Augustine came from Hippo. So we had a council in the year 393, and there basically they drew up a canon, the first canon. And the same canon was again affirmed in after 4 years in 397, and then later on after around 22 years in 419 in the Council of Carthage. So this is where they accepted the list of books in the Council of Hippo and the Council of Carthage by 419. And the church continued with this list of books comfortably for quite a long period of time. The question about the canon again came up only with the Protestant Reformation. There, one thing we have to note is that the questions did not affect the text of the New Testament at all. The New Testament canon was accepted by everyone. Even today, there is no difference of opinion about the canon of the New Testament between the Protestants and Pentecostals and the Catholics. Whereas about the Old Testament, we have differences. So since we are dealing with the New Testament, I think we can bypass that. And we can go on to now look at what happened to these books. So when these books were accepted and we had a canon, and the churches were spreading, there was need of more copies of these books. Many churches needed copies. So some of them who were using the same language as the language in which the book was written, they would just copy from the original. For example, we know that it was written in Greek. So then all the Greek-speaking churches would get hold of one copy of the Gospel of Matthew. Then they would make a copy from this particular original copy. There were two ways of copying. Either they would look and then copy, like children do from a notebook or a textbook to the notebook. The second way of writing was one would read and another person would write. In both these, there can be problems. When you look and write, you may jump a line. When you hear and write, you may sometimes write a wrong word. So occasionally, because of this way of copying, differences came between the copies of the Gospels, copies of different books. All the same copies were made. Then there was another need. That is about people who did not know Greek. So when they did not know Greek, they wanted a translation. So we also have this process of translation going on. So the books that were written... So the books which were written in Greek were now being translated. Some of the first languages into which this was translated was Syriac, then Latin, Coptic, Armenian. So into all these languages, the books of the Bible got translated. So if we look now, by this time we have got a long, we have crossed a long, or we have kind of covered a long distance. Jesus spoke originally in Aramaic or Hebrew. From there, the disciples also went around preaching Aramaic, Hebrew, Greek. The New Testament books were written in Greek. Now they were being translated into different languages. And luckily today we have the books in our own languages as well. And Bible is the most translated book in the world. Practically, in many, many languages, Bible also happens to be one of the first book that is printed in languages. In Indian languages also, it's very, very true. Even in Hindi, I think one of the first books to be printed was the Bible. Okay, more about that we can discover from our net research. Okay, so the copies were made. So we had copies in the same language and we had translations and then again copies of translations. It went on like that. And what did the communities do with these books? Naturally, they were reading the books. And what were the occasions they were reading these books? And then how would they use it? Basically, two ways of using the books. One was catechetical and theological use. read from the Bible, listen and explain, and then teaching. When they had a doubt or when they would want to teach someone more about faith, again they read from the another books of the Bible. Exhortation, when there was need for exhorting the community in regard to certain things, these books would be very, very useful. So there was use of these books in catechetical and theological context. Another important context in which the book was used was liturgical context. So in liturgy, even today, the most important place where we use the book is the liturgy. We have practically every prayer in which we have the Word of God. And we can find within the Word of God itself, hymns. We can find the credos, the assertion of faith. We will find explanations of our faith, etc. within the book. So these are the different ways in which the book began to be used by the community. So going back again, Jesus preached the gospel. Apostles continued to give witness in an oral way, the oral tradition. As their time was running out, we have the transition to writing, the written tradition, written documents. And these documents were collected. That became a canon. And along with this, there was also the process of making copies and of making translations. And the books of the Bible were used very, very widely all over the world. In NRSV, if you look at NRSV Bible, there's a preface which gives a very beautiful and nice introduction about all these things. Now we want to pass on to the second section of our study, that is about Palestine, the land of Jesus. So all the Bible, all the books of the Bible somehow presuppose a certain context. It's written based on some awareness. So for example, let us say, if I read the biography of Gandhi, and when somebody says Gujarat, I have an idea about where Gujarat is. It is in India. It is towards the west of India. When we say Gandhiji was killed in Delhi, we have an idea about where Delhi is. We also have an idea about, let us say, there was somebody who went to the Himalayas. We have an idea about the mountains. So Bible also has got references to different types of lands, the river, the lake, the mountain, the desert, etc. So it's nice for us to be aware of how was the biblical landscape. For us in India, if any of you have been, you have visited the western shore of India, then it's easy for us to understand. Imagine that you are standing on the seashore of the Arabian Sea, starting from Cape Comorin to somewhere in Gujarat. Anywhere, if you are standing on the seashore, you can just forget and then looking towards Delhi or to the north, then you can imagine that on the left side is a Mediterranean Sea, and you are on the plains of the Palestine. So the first land may be around some kilometers, 2 to 3 kilometers of that land. That's called the plain. Then you move from there towards the east. Slow hills come. You have to start climbing. If you are traveling from Bombay to Pune, for example, you will climb small hills like Lonavala and all that. So when you keep climbing, that's called the hill country. So first on the west, we have the Mediterranean, the Great Sea. Then we have some land that is plain. It's called the plain. Then after the plain, we are moving towards the east. There comes the hill country. And once you reach the top, there's a plateau. And that also is called the desert, the plateau, the desert, the hill country. Then finally, we have got again a descent towards the east. That is a Jordan Valley because it is going down towards Jordan. And then once it reaches Jordan, then water bodies. In the north, we have got the Lake of Galilee. In the south, we have got the Dead Sea. That is lower than the sea level. Once we reach this level and we cross the Jordan, again we slowly climb towards the east, the Transjordan. So that way, the biblical land is divided into 5 sections. Starting with the plains on the west, moving towards the east, we have the hill country. After the hill country, we have the higher plateau, where also the desert, some area is called the desert. Then we have the descent to the east, and then the Jordan Valley, and finally, again, after the Jordan, the Transjordan. It's easy for us to identify some of the places in these areas. For example, in the plains, we will have Haifa. In the hill country, we will have Nazareth. On the top, on the mountains, we will have Jerusalem. Then towards the valley, in the Jordan Valley, we will have Jericho. And Transjordan, we will have today's Jordan and many other places. We can very profitably check over the net for a map of the Palestine. So this is how geographically it was divided according to the altitude. Then there's another way of dividing this land. Like India is divided into different states. So I'm in Punjab now. So some of you are sitting, let us say, in UP, somebody in Gujarat, somebody in Tamil Nadu, somebody in Kerala, etc. states. In the case of Palestine at that time, this was a province of the Roman Empire. And the Romans had divided it into different administrative areas. Sometimes we call them provinces, sometimes we call them regions, more or less equivalent to the states we have in India. So in the north, we have one place name that we have many times, that is Galilee. So Galilee was a province. And in Galilee, that is where Nazareth is. In Galilee, we have got the Lake of Galilee. That's towards the north. If you got the Bible again or any map with you, NRSV Bible, at the beginning of the New Testament, there is a map in your Bibles. There's a small map given in your Bible. So you will find Galilee in capital letters, the northern part, the northern state. Then moving towards the southeast, we will find another area called Perea, which appears also in our biblical writing, not very often. Another important place name that comes in the Bible is Judea. So Judea is to the south. The most important place in Judea is Jerusalem, naturally. We have also got Bethany. Then Judea is also where we will find the place where Jesus was born, Bethlehem. These all come in Judea. So think about at least 4 states for us to identify. Galilee in the north, Judea in the south. In between, we have got Samaria. That is why it is said Jesus had to go through Samaria. So Jesus passed through Samaria. And then we have other provinces like Decapolis, Phoenicia, Syria, etc. It's a good exercise for you just to kind of identify the different places that are in Galilee and in Judea, etc. So in Judea, we have Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Bethania, Jericho, Dead Sea. So that is a very brief introduction to the land that is connected with the New Testament. Jesus himself moved from Galilee to Judea very often. He went to the Jordan River. He spent some time in the desert. He went to Jerusalem. Then he went to the areas of Tyre and Sidon. He went to Decapolis. He spent a lot of time in Capernaum by the sea. Like that we find different place names, which we can very easily identify on a map of Palestine. The third topic that is given in our syllabus is the seasons in Palestine. We in English speak about 4 seasons, the summer and the winter. And then we have got the spring and the autumn. That is how the English seasons are divided. In India, we will speak about summer, of course. In north of India, it is hot. In south of India, I think rain has already begun, so we speak about monsoon. Then we have got a time when it is cold, the winter season. And then we have the spring as well in India. In the Bible itself, we will find mention of winter more often. If you look at Matthew 24:20, there is a warning. It says, pray that your flight may not be in winter. Or another way we can understand is when Jesus is betrayed, Peter is going and sitting by the fireside. Luke chapter 22, verse 25, we read, when they had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and sat down together, then Peter went and joined them. So we know that we light a fire in winter to keep ourselves warm. So possibly when the time when Jesus was betrayed and his trial took place, it must have been a cool night, part of the winter. Then we also find John chapter 10, verse 22. There was a festival of dedication, and Jesus was in Jerusalem. John chapter 10, verse 22, it reads, "At that time, the festival of the dedication took place in Jerusalem. It was winter." So we know that this season of winter was there in Palestine, cold time. They also speak about the summer. Jesus himself speaks about the summer and the sign of summer. When you look at Matthew chapter 24, verse 32, Matthew 24:32, we read, Jesus said, "From the fig tree, learn its lesson. As soon as its branch becomes tender and puts forth its leaves, you know that summer is near." So we read in the Bible that Jesus also speaks about the summer. So at least these two seasons we can very well identify in biblical writing itself. We also hear about autumn. When you read Jude 1, verse 12, Jude 1, verse 12 gives a comparison about people who are not living a proper life of faith. They are waterless clouds, carried along by the winds, autumn trees without fruit, twice dead, uprooted. So we know that the sign of autumn in the north of India, where the poplar trees grow, in winter they all shed the leaves. So if you are not familiar with the landscape, you will think all these trees have dried up. In fact, they are all standing there for the winter without any leaves. So sometimes when people are there without any works, comparing them to autumn trees. So we find also autumn. About spring itself, we don't find the word spring, but we know we have got many references, the joy of the harvest, the joy of the sower, about the rains that come and bring in the change of season. So at least in Palestine, we can speak about the change of seasons, the summer and the winter, and then the autumn. Or in the case of the Jewish people, they spoke about the time of the harvest, the time for sowing. So seasons were there, and these seasons affected their lives in different ways, especially according to the feasts. The different feasts were kept according to different seasons. You know, in India, we have got many festivals. We have got festivals that happen in summer, in winter, in autumn, etc. So Jewish feasts also followed a certain pattern. We now come to speak about the world of Jesus. How was the world of Jesus and what were the specialities? When we speak about the world of Jesus, in the syllabus given to you, it is given political, religious, and social. So we are speaking about the atmosphere in which somebody is growing up, atmosphere in which somebody is speaking. Now, for example, if we speak about the world of our world today, we cannot avoid speaking about the effect of COVID, the change of governments, the influence of social media. These are all part of our time. Politically, let's begin now looking at the world of Jesus and how it was related. We know that in our case, what we are doing now is very much related to the different situations or different circumstances in which we are living. If we are in lockdown, it's because of a pandemic that is happening in our time. Maybe before 3 years, if somebody said lockdown, we would have asked what is lockdown. If somebody asked us to use a mask, we would have said, no, don't use a mask, you don't be hypocrite. But now we have to use it. So knowing history, knowing what was happening at the time of Jesus will help us to make sense of the many sayings of Jesus, many examples used by Jesus, and many of the challenges they faced. And Bible has got a lot to do with the history. Here we are restricting ourselves to the New Testament. Just to give you one more example to see how it is important. If you are going to Delhi, if you are going on a tour to Delhi, and imagine that your guide is taking you to see the Red Fort and the Qutub Minar. Then later on, he brings you to the Parliament building and the India Gate. And finally, he takes you to the Indira Gandhi airport. Now we see three types of buildings. And historically, we know that these are associated with different rules. The Red Fort and Qutub Minar is associated with the Mughal rulers. Then we have got the Parliament building and the India Gate that is associated with the British time. And the new Indira Gandhi airport is connected with the independent India. So within the same city, we will find kind of signs of three different rules and rulers that remained here. In the same way, when we go to Palestine, we will find their history also is marked with the occupation or marked with the predominance of different powers. Let's start like this. We'll start with the time of David only. What was before David, let us say, that we leave it to the Old Testament. So David established the kingdom, and Solomon's time it became very powerful. Then after Solomon, it was divided into North and South Israel and Judea. That much we know from our Old Testament. At least the Jews inhabited the land. The 12 tribes had got their own portions to live. And they spoke language, and they spoke Hebrew language. They had their worship, they had their temple. But then came the conquest. First, the north was conquered by the Assyrians. So we had the fall of Israel, the taking over of the northern kingdom by Assyrians. And when they came, they conquered one part, and some part of the population mixed with the Assyrians. So we have the Samaritan mixed group. So Assyrians came and ruled over Palestine, and the Jews became a subject nation. Just maybe like Mughals or British came over India. But after some time, another power came from east again, from Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar, we hear his name very often. So with him came the Babylonian culture and the language. So with the Assyrians came possibly Syriac, and with the Babylonians came the Chaldean language. So we had the second set, and the Babylonians conquered Palestine, and then they carried them away into captivity in Babylon. So Palestine itself was left to the weakest of the people and the poorest of the people. And they lived in exile for some time. And then they came back after Cyrus gave them the permission. They came back and reestablished themselves. But the independence and glory did not last for long. They were conquered by the Greeks, by Alexander and then his generals. They ruled over them. The Greek culture came over. So we have Palestine being ruled by different people. They are becoming a slave nation. So from independence, they became slaves. So they were slaves, or they were subjects of Assyrians, then of Babylonians, and then finally of Greeks. That is why Greek language became very prominent. Greek culture became very prominent. But even the Greek empire did not last for a long time. The Greeks were replaced by the Romans. And with the Romans came the Latin language. So in India, we have got Urdu that came with the Mughals. We have got English that came with the British people. So in Palestine also, in its history, they had their own language, the Hebrew. Then the Assyrians came, and the Samaritan and Syriac language came inside to some part of Palestine. Babylonians came, and Chaldean and a bit of mix of Aramaic came inside. Then the Greeks came, and this was much more influential with the Greek language. The Romans came, and they were ruling at the time of Jesus. That is why we read in John 19:20, when they kept a plate on the cross of Jesus, it was written in Hebrew, that is the mother tongue of the Jews, in Latin, that was the language of the rulers of Rome, and finally in Greek, that was by the common language, especially language of the scholars of that time. We can read about this background and these three different type of conquest. First in the book of Tobit. So if you look at the book of Tobit and read something about how the Jews lived in Assyria. Then when you read the book of Daniel, chapter 1, verse 1 onwards, we can read about how the Jews lived in Babylon. And when you read the book of Maccabees, you will hear about their struggles with the Greek and the Greek culture. So historically, at least, we must know that at the time of Jesus, the Jews remembered about 3 different occupations they had undergone: the Assyrian occupation, then the Babylonian occupation, the Greek supremacy, and finally now they were subjects of the Roman rule. So these all come up at different times in their talk and in the images they are using. So politically, this was the history of Palestine at the time of Jesus. We now move on to the next, the religious background.
Father, shall we take a break now if you want?
Yes, we can have a break.
So we'll
Yes.
break for 10 minutes. So it's
Okay.
5:02 now. So we'll be here again at 5:12. Okay,
Okay,
those of you who would like to remain, you may remain, or you can log off and log in. Thank you.
Hello, Father. Yesu,
Father, yes, Father.
are you able to see the screen now?
Yes, Father, I'm able to see, Father.
The screen? Okay.
Yes, Father, I'm able to see. Father, otherwise, would you send the file to my ID? I will share from here, Father.
Ah, very good, very good. That's nice.
And
I'll
you
send an
can
email.
explain it. Okay, sure.